Hi everyone. So today we are talking about Daniel Robinson, who went missing, I believe, in 2021. So it's very recent. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. Um, I only heard about it because of the Gabby Petito situation, and of course the talk about how people of color just don't get the same attention. And one of the people that brought up that was missing was Daniel, and I can't believe I had never heard of it because it's so fishy. It's so suspicious, and I can't believe that it hadn't been talked about. But since then, sorry, that was my laptop. A lot of YouTubers, true crime YouTubers, and podcasts that I personally listen to, they have talked about it, but I still feel like it doesn't have enough attention, and Daniel deserves to be found, so we're gonna talk about it. So all the links that I used for my research will be down below, and so will be the link to my case suggestions form, and let's go ahead and get into it. So Daniel's father, David Robinson's um, back patio used to be his comfort zone, a haven from the PTSD he still suffers after his time in the army. But on June 23rd, 2021, that little slice of heaven in Columbia, South Carolina, would change, and it began. That little slice of heaven turned into a mix of anxiety and fear, and that happened when his daughter called him to tell him that Daniel was missing. So Daniel was 24 at the time, and he worked as a geologist for Matrix New World Engineering in Arizona and was, in his father's words, quote, a scientist, a brilliant mind, end quote. So David was more than a little concerned, obviously, when his daughter told him that one of Daniel's coworkers showed up at her apartment in Phoenix asking if she had seen her brother. According to a police report obtained by Rolling Stone, Daniel had shown up to his work site, around 9 in the morning in Buckeye, Arizona, which was west of the White Tank Mountains, where a co-worker reported that he was acting strangely, staring into the distance, and, quote, talking about things that did not make sense, end quote. After about 15 minutes, Daniel left, and he hasn't been seen since. And that gives me chills because he he wasn't acting like himself, just staring into the distance. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, what he was actually saying to his coworker. Like, was he saying names? Was he just mumbling? It kind of makes you wonder what he was saying. Like, why did it not make sense? And maybe people in this actual case do know, and it's just not been talked about. But before we go any further into this, we're going to talk a little bit about Daniel himself. So Daniel had or has an innate passion for adventure and is known to travel in opportune moments. But he has always communicated with family on his travel plans. He is a scientist and he loves nature, he loves his family, and he has expressed plans for his future, so it's not like he was suicidal or anything like that. So David Robinson speaks of his son with obvious pride. Um, And he goes on to say, ever since he was a little boy, he's been a go-getter. Anything that Daniel wants to do, he does it. Um, and that is just it's so cute to hear about. Because you can tell just by looking at the photos of him, the way he smiles, he is so full of life. And it really is hard to believe that he could be missing. Um, but yeah, he just looks so happy. I can definitely see what his dad is saying. So although he was born without one forearm, he shed prosthetics, and says, some people look at him being born with one hand as a handicap, but Daniel has taught me and his mother he was nowhere near handicapped. That makes me want to cry because he sounds so strong. And instead, Daniel threw himself into some of his many interests, from musical instruments to football to weightlifting. Um, he did a lot. Like, he did not let this little thing keep him down, which is amazing. When he began attending the College of Charleston, he decided to study geology, joining a fraternity and graduating with honors. That is so cool. He's so intelligent. And his father says, quote, he is out here. He's out there, trying to expand his horizons. He wants to go to different countries. He's an entrepreneur. He wanted to start his own business. He has a lot of dreams and aspirations that he wants to do, end quote. Like, he definitely does not sound like someone who would just up and leave, potentially harm himself. Like, he just doesn't sound like that. Um, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional just, like, hearing his father describe his son. Like, you can tell that he just loves him so much, and he is so proud of him. So, at first, David tried to do his due diligence, dispatching his daughter to Daniel's apartment, calling his son's friends and cell phone, and then he realized it had been 6 hours since Daniel had gone missing. And he says, quote, that's when I got a little, well, a lot worried, end quote. And when the cops didn't seem to be moving as quickly as he would have liked, he says, that's when I grabbed anything I could grab, threw it in my vehicle, and I drove to Phoenix. He is so proactive. Like, he's an amazing father. Like, if you're not gonna find my son, I'm gonna find my son. Like, it's amazing. And it's sad that he even has to do that for the police, you know? But he's amazing for that. So Daniel was last seen the morning of June 23rd, 2021. We know that he was leaving his work site in Buckeye and that he was driving his 2017 blue-gray Jeep Renegade and is believed to have headed west, deeper into desert terrain. On Tuesday, July 19th, Daniel's vehicle was found by a rancher a little over 2.5 miles from the work site in a remote part of the desert. On that day, the rancher reported the vehicle to the Buckeye Police Department, who later did a search by ground and drone. The vehicle was recovered, and Daniel was not found. Sorry, I didn't mean to call him Danielle. A pile of his clothing and belongings was discovered nearby, his family says. The Jeep Renegade, belonging to Daniel, apparently had sped up immediately before it crashed into a ravine in a desert area, says the police. The acceleration right before the crash could, quote, indicate an attempt to drive up the other side of the ravine, end quote. Citing a collision report from the Santan Recon, a collision reconstruction and consultation company. The report also showed that more than 40 ignition cycles were recorded following the crash, which could indicate attempts to restart the car or use of the electric system. And they note that it's not clear how many of those cycles occurring during tow recovery and when investigators downloaded the data. So this was kind of hard for me to understand, but from what I got from it was that several times the car had tried to start while it was on its side in the ravine, or while it was stuck in the ravine. I could be wrong about that though. And you're gonna see what I'm talking about because there are pictures of it, and I will have them on the screen. So hopefully it kind of gives you an idea. So basically, like I said, I guess someone or something had tried to get it to go over the ravine, go up. There was an 11-mile discrepancy between the crash data report and the displayed odometer reading, which, quote, is not considered unusual, according to the report. And, quote, similar discrepancies have been noted by Jeep dealership service of departments and other crash reconstructionists, which is also what the report said. The police report does reveal that officials conducted a handful of searches for Daniel, including the use of a helicopter. And it also says the date that he went missing. It also digs into Daniel's mental state before he went missing, including the fact that David noted that his son's Instagram was scrubbed to post before his disappearance. The report also lingers on Daniel's reported fixation on a woman named Caitlin, to whom he delivered groceries while working as a side gig for Instacart. His sister told cops that Daniel said he was in love with Caitlin, and that she told him to listen to a podcast by a spiritual teacher and self-help author Eckhart Tolle that, quote, changed the way he looks at life, end quote, according to the report. And And also, it adds, the podcast showed him how to view things in the world in a positive energy and to avoid negative energy. But according to Caitlin, however, the police told police she had no relationship with him, and despite another friend of Daniel's saying that the missing man told him he had hooked up with one of the girls he delivered to, and that she and a friend invited him to hang out because they were drunk and he seemed harmless since he was short and had only one arm. But still, she told the cops that Daniel began to get creepy. And she says that he would show up at her house when she wasn't there, and he would text her that he loved her. When she told him to stop bothering her, he texted her one last time the day before he went missing, and apparently it said, "The world can get better, but I'll have to take all the time I can or we can, whatever to name it. I'll either see you again or never see you again." If that is truly a text that she received, that is incredibly troubling. But let's just go back to the fact that she made mention of his one arm and called him short, and was just like, "Oh yeah, you're harmless because of these two things, so I guess I'll hang out with you." Like, bitch, what the fuck? That is, like, so rude. Like, I don't know what his appearance has to do with shit, but that's kind of fucking rude. And I'm gonna be completely honest, Caitlin gives me a weird vibe. Um, because I'm sure Daniel told his sister and his friends a lot of details if he really did like her as much as he said. And maybe, he lied a little bit, maybe, for whatever reason. Um, but I highly doubt he's gonna, like, make up a whole potential relationship up. You know what I'm saying? So she definitely seems a little strange, but that text, the I'll either see you again or never see you again is super creepy and super troubling. And the fact that his Instagram was basically wiped clean before he went missing, I kind of do feel like he was going through something, but I just, was he going through something? Was it maybe something to do with Caitlin? Like, I just can't stop thinking that maybe she has something to do with something. I don't know. But anyways. So, obviously, Daniel's family did everything that they could. They reported a missing persons report, or they filed it, I'm sorry. They have tried to get law enforcement's help to launch an investigation into what happened, but they still obviously have a lot of questions. And so they decided to hire an independent investigator and form a volunteer search team after his father, and he believed police weren't making progress in his disappearance. So again, like, if you're not gonna look for my son, I will. Um, and his father says, once Daniel became missing, we realized that, I think, the quick action wasn't there quick enough. And that caused me to have to do a lot of my own searching. So David enlisted the help of Jeff McGrath, a former cop and vehicular crimes investigator, to take a look at Daniel's car. When McGrath saw a photo of the car, he says, it immediately struck me as odd, because he says the damage to the vehicle didn't match the location it was found in, which was a desert ravine. According to the police report, the Jeep had suffered significant damage consistent with a front impact that caused it to roll. The front window was shattered, and there was, quote, substantial damage, end quote, to the lower front as well as the windshield and roof. So McGrath was skeptical of the roll theory, and he obtained the car's black box, which allowed him to ascertain that the car was going about 30 miles per hour before the airbags deployed. That set up alarm bells for him, who used his own vehicle to see if that speed was possible in the rugged terrain. His experiment indicated that it was not. Also, the car had traveled 11 miles after the airbags deployed. And he says, quote, it just raised my suspicions even further that this vehicle, whether it was by Daniel or somebody else, was crashed somewhere else, end quote. And every time that I have heard that detail, it gives me chills. Because how did it get there if it wasn't there initially? You know what I'm saying? And then we go back and we think about how his items and his clothes were near the vehicle. Like, it's just, it's eerie. Because what happened? Meanwhile, Robinson and McGrath are leaving no proverbial stone unturned. They're taking tips from anyone who has them, including psychics. The femurs were found in an area one such medium said to search. McGrath has his theories about what happened to Daniel. That So Daniel was a marijuana user and smoked a PCP lace joint and crashed his car, and that would explain his weird behavior before his disappearance, or that he was simply tired after a long night of gaming. He was building his own computer, and bummed about being rejected by Caitlin, drove into the desert to rest, where he met, quote, the wrong person. So David, however, knows one thing to be true, and he says, I believe in my heart, I don't believe that my son wanted to be away from his family. My theory is more geared towards somebody did something to my son, or somebody knows what happened to my son and is not saying anything. I don't think my son wrecked his vehicle, got out on his own accord, took his clothes off, and just walked off and survived out there in the desert somewhere. I don't believe that, end quote. And I actually really agree with that. Um, I'm sure he was heartbroken about being rejected from Caitlin, or by Caitlin, and maybe he was smoking to like maybe help or something, trying to get his mind off of it, and maybe it did mess with his psyche a little bit. But I don't think that would have been enough to literally do everything he just said and then to like never show back up again. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that could have happened, and maybe he did meet the wrong person. I don't know how much I actually believe that. So I definitely get what his dad is saying, and I definitely believe that more than I do McGrath. So their next goal is to continue pushing forward to find out what happened to Daniel, even if it means no help from law enforcement. They said that they will continue to seek support from anyone who wants to help. They won't settle for the minimum amount of searches and support sworn law enforcement officers and detectives are giving his case. So, obviously, the way his case was handled from day one by law enforcement, um, it's sad, it's gross because it doesn't feel like they were doing enough. It's heartbreaking. And we're going to get now into more about how the case has been compared to Gabby Petito's and how it hasn't been getting as much attention. And I feel like this is a very important conversation to have. So, David Robinson has said that the amount of news coverage his black son's disappearance has received is hurtful when compared to that of Gabby Petito's case. He says, quote, you wish you lived in a world where everything was equal, but it's really not equal. And he does say that he sympathizes with Petito's family before somebody gets mad. And Daniel's brother, Roger Colley Robinson, echoed his father's sentiments and says, it just saddens me that it takes this much, to get people's story out like my brother or anyone else. We shouldn't have to depend on other stories or other cases to push our own story, and we just want answers just like anyone else. I think my brother or everyone else's brothers or father or siblings, whoever they may be, they deserve the same attention. End quote. Which I 100% agree. Like, it shouldn't matter what they look like. If someone is missing, they deserve to be found. End of story. And that should be what matters. And yes, Gabby Petito mattered. Everyone who goes missing matters. But I learned about so many cases this last summer of people that were missing and had been missing around the same time as her that just got um, swept under the rug because this pretty white girl, was missing. And it's just sad because they all deserved more coverage. And the amount of people that had been found while they were searching for Gabby that probably wouldn't have been found if she hadn't went missing. And it's just sad to know that that had to happen for anything to be happening about anybody else's case. So this next information is from a January article of this year, 2022. And it says, it has been 7 months since geologist Daniel Robinson was last seen, and on January 14th, a day when he would have celebrated his 25th birthday, David was preparing to search abandoned mines and underground wells in the desert for his son. So his father is currently living in a hotel and is scouring the desert near Buckeye for his son. And he says, there's 2 well sites where my son was last seen that need to be searched with cadaver dogs. Also, a camera needs to go down that well. There's some mines out there, vertical mines, that need to be searched. So, volunteers will also be conducting line searches with the efforts fueled by David's desperation and determination. And he says this part is so heartbreaking. He says, quote, "You can imagine, after 7 months, it's no longer a rescue mission, it's a recovery mission out in the desert." That is heartbreaking. It feels like his father has kind of accepted that maybe Daniel isn't coming home how he would like. And to be a parent and to know that your child is gone and that they probably aren't going to come back alive, it's so sad. And it's even sadder when you realize that you haven't been able to find them and that police aren't helping like they should. It's heartbreaking, and I feel for the family so much. Hopefully answers will come up soon, that will either lead to Daniel being found or he will be found. And if the family sees this, I just want to know that your son has deserved so much more media attention, and he sounded like an amazing person, and I'm hoping the best for y'all. And even if that doesn't happen, I hope that you get answers and Daniel gets his peace. So, thank you everyone for listening to Daniel's story. And if there's ever updates in the future, I will update you then. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.